She tracked my every move, called it structure, and beat me with a leather strap for not journaling daily. When I exposed the bruises, she claimed it was discipline. So I built a case, screenshots, voice memos, and her own rulebook. Last month, I flinched when the gavel fell. This time, she did too. When I first moved in with Dad and Melissa, she greeted me with a chore chart and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. I thought she was just organized. Then came the timer. Efficiency matters, she said. And the leather strap hung by the fridge. I laughed nervously. Dad said she believed in structure. I logged my study hours to impress her, but one missed entry led to a night of silence, tension, and shame I couldn't explain. Melissa praised me publicly for my focus, but behind closed doors, she whispered consequences for blinking during study. She'd tightened the leather strap on her wrist, not to hit, but to signal. Dad never noticed. Once, I dozed off at my desk, and she made me scrub the bathroom until sunrise. I told Emily, my classmate, thinking she'd laugh. She didn't. She showed me her old scar, then whispered, she used to time me too. Melissa installed a family task app, assigning me quotas for chores, reading, even resting productively. If I failed, the strap clacked against the counter, never touching, just threatening. I tracked her schedule too, noting her routines. Emily helped decode Melissa's old reports, but one page was missing. Dad said I was being dramatic. My teachers saw improvement in my grades. I wonder, if I looked so productive, would anyone believe me when I said I felt like a prisoner? Melissa added a reflection log, where I had to rate myself hourly. Accountability builds character, she said, tapping her watch. I scored myself low once she made me skip dinner. Emily suggested documenting everything. I placed a hidden recorder in the kitchen. Dad found it and frowned. You're making her sound like a monster, he said. Melissa hugged him with that tight-lipped smile. I wondered, was her productivity turned weapon, just invisible enough to never count as abuse? One evening, I blinked too long during dishes. Melissa slammed the drawer shut, the leather strap brushing her wrist. Focus, dear, she hissed. I recorded her tone, the thud, my silence. Emily compared the audio to hers, identical phrases, same pauses. We weren't alone. I asked my counselor about emotional control. She noted concerns, but Melissa smiled through the parent meeting, quoting achievement discipline. I wondered, if the system measured results, who would measure the scars underneath? Melissa launched a family productivity report, color, coded and emailed weekly to Dad. I was green. Emily called it performance propaganda. We met with 2 more former stepkids, each had their version of productivity turned weapon. One broke down recounting the strap's sound. I confronted Melissa subtly, asking, do you remember Emily? Her smile faltered. Dad said I was obsessing. I wondered, was truth enough when charm, structure, and numbers built a facade strong enough to silence real pain? During a school family night, I forgot to log my evening tasks. Melissa cornered me by the lockers. You're slipping, she whispered, leather strap in hand. I hit record on my phone. Emily waited nearby, watching. I asked loudly, will this be another reflection punishment? Parents turned, Melissa froze. A teacher approached. Is everything okay? I nodded slowly, then handed her the phone. For the first time, Melissa's mask cracked. Just a little, but enough. At home, Melissa acted calm, but she locked the strap away. Dad noticed the missing charts and asked questions. I printed transcripts of her commands, the silent punishments. Emily, brave, handed in her old logs. We mailed everything anonymously to a counselor. Melissa responded by flooding the house with new rules. Resting isn't recovery, she snapped, tracking our bathroom breaks. I stared at her and whispered, you're not building discipline, you're feeding control. She blinked. Our counselor called for a family session. Melissa arrived in pearls, carrying her productivity binder. She smiled sweetly, but I watched her knuckles tense. I just care, she said, flipping charts. I pulled out Emily's scar photo, placed it beside my audio log. Silence. Dad shifted in his chair. The counselor leaned forward. Melissa, these patterns are alarming. For the first time, Melissa didn't speak. Her strap wasn't on her wrist. She looked smaller somehow. Melissa slammed the binder shut. They're manipulating you. She snapped at Dad, voice cracking. He recoiled. This isn't discipline, it's domination. I said, my hands shaking. Emily slid forward a letter, signed by 2 other former stepkids. Dad read it, slower than I expected. Why didn't you tell me? He whispered. Melissa's face flushed. No charts, no timers, no smile. Just silence. The room held its breath. I realized. We weren't asking for justice. We were demanding it. The counselor recommended child services involvement. Melissa's voice dropped cold. You'll destroy this family with lies. Dad stood between us. You already did. That broke something. Melissa's hand twitched toward her purse, the strap likely inside. I stepped back. No more codes, no more metrics. Emily nodded. The counselor confirmed a report would be filed. Melissa stormed out, her heels loud but her presence suddenly powerless. I exhaled. The fear didn't vanish, but it no longer ruled me. That night, I found the leather strap in the trash. Coiled neatly, it looked harmless. I didn't touch it. Instead, I added one final entry to my reflection log. I am not broken. I am awake. Emily messaged. They believed us. Dad sat beside me quiet. I should have seen it. I didn't reply. He handed me an old photo. Me smiling, free. Let's get her back, he said. For the first time, I believed we might. Just as we began breathing again, a CPS officer arrived with a surprise report. Melissa had filed a counterclaim. She says you're retaliating for academic discipline. The agent explained. My stomach dropped. Emily clenched her fists. Melissa had framed us before we ever exposed her. The strap was gone from the trash. Dad tried calling Melissa. She didn't pick up. I wondered, how many systems reward a polished chart over a silenced child crying for help? The officer toured our house, noting improved conditions. Melissa had cleaned everything, removed every tracker, every chart. Looks normal, he said. I showed him old photos, timestamps, even voice memos. But these are months old, he replied. Emily stepped in, offering affidavits from former stepkids, but he hesitated. Hard to verify without visible harm. My chest tightened. Melissa didn't just control our home, she'd manipulated the narrative. I whispered, she's already 2 moves ahead. He didn't disagree. A week later, Melissa posted a video online crying, holding the strap, claiming regret, and false accusations. The caption read, "Even good moms make mistakes." It went viral. Comments flooded in sympathy, praise, anger at disobedient teens. Emily screamed into her pillow. I stared at the screen numb. The strap, now a symbol of her redemption arc, had turned into a prop. She'd rewritten the abuse as discipline, and now the internet applauded her performance. Emily's old friend Kara messaged us in secret. Melissa coached me on how to lie to CPS, she wrote. Attached was a voice recording Melissa rehearsing emotionally respectful punishments. Kara never submitted it before, scared, ashamed. Now she was ready. I cried listening to Melissa's flat tone, her fake concern. Dad forwarded it to our attorney. This changes everything, he said. I finally felt it, not victory, but momentum. We weren't screaming into a void anymore. Someone had heard. Our attorney filed the recording with CPS and the local paper. The article dropped 2 days later, Behind the Discipline, The Hidden Lives of Melissa Crane's Stepchildren. It included quotes, audio snippets, timelines. Emily and I weren't named, but we didn't need to be. Comments shifted. I knew something felt off in that video. The support rolled in quiet, then louder. Melissa's redemption story cracked. Her productivity turned weapon, couldn't survive public truth. Finally, people started listening. Melissa went silent online. Her lawyer released a statement. No further comments at this time. But a second former stepchild, Max, came forward. She used to track my dreams, he told the reporter. I remembered Melissa's bedtime charts, her sleep quality scores. Max had photos, detailed logs, bedtime punishments, notes in red ink. The paper published them. Now, Melissa wasn't a misunderstood parent. She was a pattern. The leather strap wasn't discipline. It was documentation waiting too long. The school district launched an internal review. Melissa had volunteered on the parent committee, even helped design a student success tracker. Now, teachers whispered. One forwarded a copy of her original proposal, loaded with behavioral metrics eerily similar to our home charts. Emily's face went pale. She was scaling it, she said, not just to us, to schools. I stared at the document. Her obsession with control wasn't private. It had been a pilot all along. Emily and I met with a local journalist in person. We'll go on record, I said. My voice shook, but I didn't flinch. We shared everything, our logs, recordings, timelines, Kara's clip, Max's documents. The reporter listened, scribbled, then asked, "What do you want out of this?" I answered without thinking. To make sure no one calls this parenting again. She nodded. The piece would run nationally. Melissa's reach wasn't just collapsing. It was about to implode. The national article hit headlines, When Productivity Becomes Punishment. It quoted our words, featured Melissa's spreadsheet excerpts, included expert commentary on psychological abuse. Child psychologists called her methods systematic coercion. A senator reposted it, demanding legislation around digital discipline. Emily cried reading the comments. I lived this. This was my childhood. Strangers weren't just sympathizing, they were connecting. Melissa's carefully curated silence shattered. Her system, once praised, now read like a case study in harm. We weren't alone anymore. Melissa tried one last movie, suing for defamation. But the court dismissed it, citing substantial corroborated evidence. Our attorney smiled. She weaponized productivity, you weaponized truth. Emily laughed through tears. Even Dad testified, holding her printouts, saying, I thought she was helping, I was wrong. The judge nodded slowly. This wasn't discipline, it was design. The courtroom didn't erupt, but in that silence, I felt something shift. We weren't victims anymore, we were survivors, and she couldn't rewrite that. After the ruling, a group of parents contacted us. We've seen versions of her system in other schools, one said. We shared our evidence templates, our logging reversal method, turning the metrics back on the abuser. A nonprofit offered to help us formalize it. Your survival model could protect others, they said. Emily looked stunned. We're not just healing, we're building shields. I nodded. Melissa's weapon had a blueprint. Now, so did our resistance, and it was spreading. A podcast picked up our story. Emily and I spoke, voices shaking but clear. She turned structure into surveillance. I said, listeners flooded in. Survivors from other states emailed, sharing eerily similar tales, timers, charts, punishments disguised as routines. The host called it a silent epidemic. We weren't outliers, we were a pattern. Melissa had wanted efficiency, control, image. She left behind a movement. One mother wrote, I threw away my timer after hearing you. That meant everything. Melissa's sister, who'd remained silent for years, finally spoke out. She did this to me too. She admitted in a radio interview. Different tools, same intent control. The host played a voicemail, Melissa instructing her niece to rank your gratitude today. Emily stared at the speaker, frozen. Another layer peeled back. Melissa hadn't become this way overnight. She'd refined it, replicated it. Legacy through punishment. But now, the truth outpaced her lies. Her empire was eroding publicly, relentlessly. The school board issued a formal apology. We failed to vet her methods, they admitted. Melissa's entire achievement framework was pulled from pilot programs. Parents protested not against us, but for oversight. One held a sign, discipline not equal to abuse. Emily and I attended, unnoticed in the back, hands clenched. When the crowd cheered the motion to ban parental productivity metrics, I cried, not because we won, but because we weren't invisible anymore. The silence had finally broken. Melissa was officially barred from working with minors, but it didn't end there. A former coworker leaked internal emails, Melissa coaching parents on behavioral logging for obedience. Her language was cold, clinical. Minimize empathy. One message read, news outlets latched on. The woman once hailed as a role model was now dissected as a warning. Emily muttered, she didn't just hurt us, she taught others how to. And now, we were unteaching, one exposure at a time. Our nonprofit launched officially the Unmeasured Project. We trained volunteers to identify covert control tactics masked as self-improvement. Survivors submitted stories. One girl wrote, my mom made me log apologies. Another shared photos of reward charts used to withhold food. Emily read each entry aloud, her voice cracking. We were never isolated, she said. I nodded, gripping the first leather strap we'd ever exposed, now sealed in a case. Not as a threat, as evidence of endurance. We held our first Survivor Summit. 40 attendees, shared stories, swapped tactics, cried openly. A boy stood up, shaking, and said, I thought I was just lazy, turns out I was controlled. Applause erupted. Emily led a session on data vs. dignity. I watched her speak confident, steady. We'd once whispered in fear. Now we spoke into microphones. Melissa's system had isolated us. Our response had united strangers into a network of voices she could never silence. A university contacted us, they wanted to study our archive. This is HAP, an AINS cultural IDE of you phenomenon, said. We hesitated, but agreed. Months later, the first paper published, Covert Control Through Domestic Metrics. It cited our nonprofit as the origin point. Emily framed the abstract. It's official, she said, they're naming it. Melissa had craved recognition through control. Ironically, her legacy lived on as a case study in harm, and ours, as the reason it would never repeat. Melissa resurfaced briefly, an op-ed titled I Was Misunderstood. No apology, just deflection, but the comment section turned fast. Survivors flooded it with counterpoints, receipts, quotes. Kara posted the recording again. Max shared one of Melissa's handwritten punishments. Log your apologies until I believe them. It went viral. Within hours the op-ed was pulled. Emily laughed bitterly. She tried one last rebrand. I replied, and this time we answered together. Truth, once released, doesn't go back in the box. 1 year after it began, we returned to that courtroom. This time, not as victims, but speakers. The judge invited us to share policy recommendations. Emily stood beside me, holding the sealed strap case. This symbol used to control us, she said. Now it educates others. Applause filled the chamber. Melissa's name was never spoken aloud. She didn't need to be. The system she built had collapsed. In its place stood something stronger, a future measured by healing. I sat on the nonprofit's porch, watching new volunteers arrive, some nervous, some defiant. I clutched my old reflection log, the one I once used to judge myself. Now it held truths, not scores. Emily placed a hand on my shoulder. You kept going, she said. I smiled, barely. The leather strap stayed locked away, but its echo pushed me forward. I whispered, I'm not who she tried to shape. I'm who I chose to become. During a support group meeting, a teenage girl hesitated before sharing. I still feel guilty when I rest, she confessed. I handed her a worksheet we'd made. Rest is not laziness. She stared at it, then at me. You really believe that? I nodded. Now I do. As she relaxed into the circle, I saw myself years ago, scared, exhausted, desperate for permission to breathe. And now I was giving others the freedom I once begged for. I revisited the school where it all cracked open. The lockers hadn't changed. A teacher recognized me and whispered, thank you. She pointed to a new poster. Accountability doesn't mean surveillance. I touched it gently. Emily joined me, eyes wide. We started something real, she said. I nodded. The fear hadn't vanished, but it transformed. Into purpose, into change, into a promise that no child would confuse pressure for love ever again. That poster, it was louder than trauma. Melissa never faced prison, but her name faded from every parenting forum, advisory board, and school panel. Her consulting firm dissolved. Parents who once quoted her efficiency model now apologized. At one town hall, a father said, we let metrics replace compassion. Emily and I watched quietly. That was enough. No rage, no revenge. Just disappearance. Her silence, once oppressive, now felt like closure. Justice didn't roar. It simply erased her influence, one accountability at a time. Our nonprofit expanded chapters in 3 states, training programs, school workshops. Emily led a webinar titled Rest is Resistance, and over 200 signed in. I taught parents how to spot coercion hidden in routine. We weren't fixing everything, but we were disrupting cycles. At one seminar, a mom cried, I didn't know I was hurting her. We hugged her. That moment acknowledgement without shame was the real win. Healing doesn't erase harm, but it makes room for better. On the anniversary of our first court day, we buried the leather strap in a garden outside the center. No ceremony, just quiet planting. Over it, we placed a plaque, nothing productive about pain. Emily cried. I did too, not from grief, but from release. That strap once measured our worth. Now, it fed something alive. Something kind. As we walked away, I whispered, let this be the last thing she ever controls. And it was.